All right, and run. So today I want to talk a little bit about the author Robert Salzman. He's a psychologist and the author of such books such as Depending on Nothing and The 10,000 Things. Now, uh, he I had made a video on having your own mind, and that makes um on you relying on your own conscious contact, let's say, with the world to go to make your own decisions and decide stuff and what have you. Now the thing is, um, that kind of contradicts what he says sometimes. Um, Now I read to you from his website where it says, uh, which is Doctor slash hyphen. I'm sorry, Doctors hyphen Robert.com / Q&A, the questions and answers page, and it says, uh, and then there's a page on your own discernment, and then it says, so and so then he says, so he goes on to say in in a question, nothing can be done, of course, is that is what happens. Nobody can tell another one how to get out of the sensation of and belief in being a particular self. If it happens, then just someone does get out of that belief. Like in your case, it just happens. Nobody can tell another one how to get out of the me story. Now, I suppose this has to do a lot with so called enlightenment or awakening. If you remember, now this is something that is science, it's not something woo woo, you know. Basically, we are born without a sense of self. And you might ask, how do I know that? And you know that how, you know? And I would say, well, there's scientific experiments that have been done about the sense of self. And for example, I think one of them is they put like a newborn baby or in front of a mirror, and they put like a piece of paper on their forehead or something, and then the baby, and then something happens. I'm not really sure. You can look for it. Um, you can search for it on Google, on whichever web search engine. Scientific experiments for of self awareness babies, stuff like that. And so basically, what is found is that a baby does not recognize itself, it's not self aware until around 2 to 3 years of age. And that's when it starts recognizing, itself in a mirror. It starts to have a sense of self, a sense of someone who is in a someone, you know, doing stuff, a someone to which actions happen, etc., etc., etc. Now, if you remember, um, now when we are born, we're born without this sense of self, and that's something that can be seen. And well, and you remember when you're born, you're like um, totally in awe of your conscious contact with the world. You see like um, you can get lost in time just seeing the beauty of like a leaf on a tree, and and just stare at it for like and just in awe, and you're fascinated by this world with your uh, you know and that fascination, that awe, that that feeling of contentment with conscious contact with the world, with our senses, it 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 goes away eventually, and it goes away eventually, and apparently it starts around 2 years of age, 3 years um, of age. Uh, it starts going away, and when you lose it, you know, you lose you lose your conscious, that awe in conscious contact, that wonder that you used to have just looking at a leaf on a branch, uh, you know. And what happens is you become immersed in mind, in 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 the ego, you know. And oh, this, and now everything happens to me, and how does this relate to me, and how does this affect me, and me here, and I this here and there, and it's just the ego. And so what what many um what many, let's say, spiritual traditions and religious authors speak about, you know um, is losing this ego, kind of, where you always, is losing this sense of self, so to speak, and become, oh, let me rephrase that. And a lot of spiritual traditions and religions talk about a so-called enlightenment, or a awakening, in where you find peace, and you find wonder and awe, and stability within your life, as you did when you were a child, before you had that sense of self, and you had that awe and that wonder. And so you know um the Bible said, seek within, and for within, the kingdom of heaven is within. uh, Now, you can, for those that believe in heaven, you know uh that's something else. But the heaven that 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 the Bible speaks of may be just that which is within us, the our consciousness, our conscious contact with the world. And if we understand heaven, maybe not such as a literal, as a physical place, but as in peace and nirvana, and yeah, nirvana, and some kind of contentment with the with with what is, with this moment right now, this becomes a different this provides a different light into which to read this concept, to read this Bible verse. And it means basically we are peace is within us, is within our consciousness. And we have and if we connect with this, with our consciousness, and we connect with this, um, with that which is, we we can we can experience peace, and contentment, you know with ourselves, with life. So there's that, uh um there's that thing, that awakening, and a lot of and that such awakening to seeing life for what it is, and understanding, you know that you know there that life right now is this what we have. And this has to do also with Eckhart Tolle, the power of now, that to be in the moment, and also to accept that this moment right now, what we have is everything. um, and our mind is such that it's always thinking about the past or in the future, and we never really fully concentrate on being just present right now. And sometimes that is what keeps us from experiencing that that might be what is keeping us from experiencing that conscious contact with the world, with and the awe and wonder that comes with being in conscious contact presently, fully. uh, that's what's keeping us. And so that's something that, to understand this, maybe, I mean, taking from from this book, um, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. There's two ways of knowing things. There's something that which is like an intellectual knowledge, and there's something that you realize, and that's something that you experience with with all your experience, not only with your mind but with your body, and perhaps, sometimes we might know that uh, all we have is this moment, but we haven't really realized this on a deeper level, on an energetic level, on a feeling level. And so this is what sometimes is um, is important, and there's a lot of ways, of going about this, about feeling this, this uh, getting a more energetic hold, taking a to getting to feel this, sometimes is 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 the question. And so sometimes, you know um, there's a lot of ways, to. I think that people sometimes, might want to get this kind of sensory knowledge, this feeling of being again as a child, of direct awe and wonder, of being in the moment and all this, and there's a lot of and I think there's a lot of I don't know how to say this. There's a lot of stuff that has been written on ways to, and there's a lot of stuff that people say that will get you there, to that feeling, and you know it's something that you might say, is something akin to a spiritual practice. That's where religions and spiritual practices come in sometimes, and say, well, okay, you know once you pray 1,000 times, you'll reach this feeling, this enlightenment. Or if that's Christianity or the Abrahamic religions, and then you have the Buddhist religions and uh they say, well, okay, once you've meditated, maybe, I don't know, 1,000, you know you've meditated 30 years of your life, you'll eventually, get this understanding on a deeper level, this feeling of enlightenment, this awakening. And and so that's where a lot of these spiritual traditions and religions come in. It seems, and offers these spiritual practices, these practices to attain something, you know, and 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 that's where a lot of uh, um, and that's where a lot of non-dual, and that's where non-duality comes in, I think. uh you know um Basically, non-duality is basically saying that everything is one, and that comes from Advaita, which is an Indian, which one's from India, I think. And so everything is one, and you might say, how do you how do you know this? And I can't say I don't. I have, and I can't say I really know it. Um, uh, I can't say really, other than experience. Um, that, or I can't even really say that. I mean, I don't know that everything is one. I can just say that I remember when I was a child, and and I was 2 years old, and I was in awe of everything, and I and in wonder of simple conscious contact with seeing and hearing and stuff like that. Excuse me. So I can understand sometimes that it's um where that well, actually, well, a light just it's like a switch just flipped, because that's kind of like how I know experience. When you have that conscious contact, that direct wonder, you know that you're not really You're like one with the world because you're just experiencing everything, you know, directly. You're not thinking about, oh, uh you're not thinking, what is this? You're not thinking about how does this affect me and in the future, and how's this affected me in the past, and you're just there, you know, and you're not thinking about about self. You're not thinking about time. You just you're just having direct conscious contact in the moment, you know. So how do I know how? And you know this how? Experience. That's 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 how I know that. And so basically, having that having that experience, you know, helps. Remembering this experience from youth helps, and that's something that, you know, um, that can help. And so going back to Advaita, the non-duality, um, in that sense that I understand it, um, the non-dual teachers basically say that everything is one, and I think they're kind of like pointing out that, you know, that we experience the world as ourselves as one when we're small, and you could say when we're like 2 or 3, when we're less than 2 and 3 years old, and we understand this, and we realize this on a feeling level, you know. And so non-duality says, and so then there's some non-dual teachers who say, come and say, well, there's no way you can not um there's no way that you cannot uh be yourself. um there's no way that you cannot be in this present moment. And that's easy to say. I mean, you know, I think an author that says this a lot is Paul Hederman. He's an author, and he's authored some books. Uh, you know, I think this is one of them. You know, The Escape to Everywhere. Yeah. So it's a book about, you know, that he wrote about basically about that non-dualism, and how you cannot never be in this moment. Basically meaning that you're always having conscious contact, but what happens is your mind is has been has been brainwashed into thinking that, you know, that that and brainwashed in such a way that it goes ahead and thinks, you know, and makes up these stories, and you know, and tries for us, and makes up these narratives that, you know, that affect us, really, in a way that makes us um, that makes us that affects us in a way that prevents us from really experiencing this direct contact on a feeling level, you know. And to such extent, You know, I really understand it this way, and so um, this is something important to see that, well, on a certain level, of course, you know. And you might say, well, and you know that how, Paul? Asking, you know, about how do you know that, we always are having conscious contact with the world, and we don't see it because, you know, of this, because of our monkey minds, let's say, so to speak, that are in, as the Eastern traditions have called it, I think, the monkey mind, referring to, our thoughts that are constantly always, our thoughts are always going on and thinking this and that and here and there, and always, thoughts here and thoughts there, and not really concentrating on and not really experiencing that, the direct conscious contact, um, directly, uh, without an intermediary thought process, in other words. So that's the thing that uh that I think is something important here to mention. As it says here, consciousness is, I'm reading from the book of Hederman. Consciousness is going through the doors of the senses and meeting itself here. The mental process then claims it. I am the one seeing, doing, etc. It's my body. You see what it's like, that claiming that begins at like 3 years old. It's your attention. If your attention left the mental process, if you weren't so addicted to the idea of being a self, if your attention would entertain, possibly I'm not this and I'm so absorbed in. And as you would see, there is no need to get out of self, because there was never a self to be in. That's referring to all these spiritual and religious practices that say, oh, you have to pray 1,000 rosaries. Um, you have to pray every day. Um, you have to, uh, regarding the Christianity and the Abrahamic religions, then you have to meditate 30 years for the Eastern religious traditions, before you can become awakened and experience this this peace and direct conscious contact and what have you. So he's referring to that when he says about, you know there's never a, you know there's no need to get out of the self, because there was never uh, so you weren't addicted to the idea of being a self if your attention could entertain. Or was I possibly I'm not this that I'm so absorbed in, and as you would see, there is no need to get out of self, because there's never a self to be in. Okay. Now he goes on to say, sensations of the body are hijacked by the mental process, which spins out a story of feelings about you. Aha. This is the direct conscious contact that we mentioned, and it gets hijacked by the mental process, or let's say the ego, some will call it, about what was you and what is going to be you. Then the thoughts reinforce. There's a little bit of like, there seems to be some kind of something on the book, can't read. Then the thoughts reinforce that. Exactly. Obsessing over self all day. Yep, sounds about right. We are saddled with a prescribed way of looking called self-centeredness, Everything is perceived as how it pertains to me. The thing to do is turn the light on it so that we see all there is subject. There is no object called me as a subject. There's just subjective, there's just a subjectivity. That's the truth. And this comes back to having direct conscious contact and with the world, and that's all there is, you know. Um, and you might say, well, how do you know that's all there is? Well, um, we perceive life through our senses. So everything we see, everything we hear, everything we perceive, it has to go through a filter, you know, which is our sense organ. So the somehow this gets processed by our sense organs, and and it's really interesting that there's different realities. Their reality could be different for different type of people, you know. And that's simple saying a different type of organisms. Let's say dogs, you know, they I'm not really sure. I think they have a different hearing um, organ, so they can hear some frequencies that we don't hear. Um, and I think they don't see colors, you know, or there's a so dogs see in black and white, and we see color. And now, and if we think reality is you know, reality is is objective. Well, if we think, you know, that what you see out there is objective and it doesn't change, it changes though for certain organisms. For dogs, it's black and white reality, and for us, we see reality in color. So that's something that relates to how that that we filter our reality in such a way sometimes with our sense organs. Um, then enlightenment that ties into that's just subjectivity. That's the truth. Then enlightenment and all these goals become non-goals because you realize there is nothing to seek. So that's basically saying, you know, all there is conscious contact, buddy. Thing is that you have effectively been, I don't know what to what degree we can use this word, indoctrinated into thinking that there's a self and that is something, you know, that is happening to, and it's something that has, you know, and there's a self that's in the past and there's a self in the future that things did happen to and that will happen to, and and you know and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you get on these um and you get on and these and you perceive these thoughts, and you lose contact with, you know, with direct conscious contact with the world. uh and it goes on now. uh you already know what the game is like when you're identified as a body. Now you might see how it goes when you're not. The narration about the journey is the heaviness. You see the solution by the problem's absence. When the narration is dismissed, you realize that's what I was suffering from. Now, so what he's saying is you're identified as a body. So that's kind of like, well, you might say, what about the body? I mean, the body, aren't we a body? And yes, we are. It appears we do. We might have a body, but I think it was. Teilhard de Chardin, who said, some French guy said, we are not physical beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a physical experience. And now again, you might say, how, well, and you know this how? And again, um, you know, this might tie into quantum physics, that basically uh, reality is quantum physics basically says that everything is energy. Everything is vibration, frequency. Solid matter doesn't exist. Everything are at have are atoms, and atoms are made of of uh, of photons. Like let me see here. Atoms. Basically, I'm not really so I'm not really sure how on the specifics, but basically quantum physics just says everything is energy, everything is vibration. And so with having said that, that means that basically, um, we and as such, everything is energy, everything is vibration. Um, this ties into, you know, the the us that we are spiritual, beings having a physical experience. Now, um, again, these are all stuff that you can experience on a on an intellectual level, on the intellectual understanding, on going going to um, okay, where was I? Going back to the intellectual level. There are realizations, so to speak, where you understand this on a feeling level, on a level of your direct conscious contact with senses, as you had when you were little, under the age of 2 or 3 years old, before you had a sense of self. And